Okay, so what was the last topic which I took? Last topic, anyone? What was the last topic which I took? Online class. Memory fades in 1 week.
Non-communicable diseases, ischemic heart disease, and coronary vascular disease.
Okay, could you tell me in non-communicable diseases about the causes? I had said something which is common to all non-communicable diseases regarding the cause, etiology. What is the term for it?
Multifactorial causation.
One-to-one causation is not there. So what is it called?
No, ma'am, multifactorial causation.
Multifactorial, good. But that there is a term for this multifactorial causation. It is called web of causation. It's called, what is it called?
Web of causation.
Yes, web of causation. So this web of causation, if you get a short note on that, you have to write about non-communicable diseases, how it is not a one-to-one. It is not a one-to-one factor. It is always multiple factors. Some factor might be more prominent, some factor might be little less, but they all contribute in some way or the other in causation of the disease. Okay. Next, I had said about the risk factors. There are two groups in the risk factors. What are they for all non-communicable diseases? What are they? Two groups.
Modifiable and non-modifiable. Constitutional.
Yes, modifiable and non-modifiable. This again you got to remember, for all non-communicable diseases, there are these two groups, modifiable and non-modifiable. So modifiable risk factors are the ones on which you can what? What can you do with the modifiable? Yes? Respond, I'm asking you.
Multiply modifications, ma'am.
Yes, you can do those modifications of those risks which are in the modifiable. So then ultimately, where does it land you when you know about the modifiable risks? What you can do is you can write about, when you write about prevention, when you're talking about prevention of that particular disease, that time you talk about the modifiable factors, the modifiable risk factors, which you will be modifying and reducing the risk and thus preventing the disease from happening. Have you got it? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Why can I hear only one voice? I wonder. Where are the rest? You just log in and disappear, huh? Go off here and there. Go to the other room. Come on, respond, all of you. I want to hear your good morning.
Morning, ma'am.
Yes. Morning, some other voices. Let me hear.
Good morning, ma'am.
That's it. 4 voices so far. Out of 88 who have logged in.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning,
6,
ma'am.
7,
Good morning, ma'am.
8, 9, 10.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning, ma'am.
Morning, ma'am.
Yes, all of you please be alert. I have heard now only 15 voices so far.
Good morning,
92
ma'am.
logged in.
Good morning. Good morning,
Good
ma'am.
morning, isn't it? Any more people? Or you're just logged in and disappeared somewhere?
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
So today you can see what's the topic here. Can you see?
Yes, ma'am.
What is it?
Hypertension.
Hypertension. So today I'm going to start hypertension. And then I'll go on to stroke. Okay. So now you need not respond. I will just speak to you. Okay, and at the end of the class, then I will again ask you some questions. Fine? So shall I start? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Shruti, the slide is not changing. Okay. Now, hypertension is also referred as high blood pressure. So basically, the blood pressure stays chronically high, is chronically elevated. You all know how to take blood pressure? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Blood pressure. Now, this blood pressure, when it stays continuously high, then it is called hypertension. So, for clinical classification of hypertension, 3 blood pressure readings should be taken, at least on 2 different occasions. All right. So, when a person comes, any person comes to you and you have to take the blood pressure, one is routinely when you're taking with other examination. You take the vitals, in that you're taking blood pressure. But then you have this one reading which has come high. So on the basis of that one reading, you will not label that person as hypertensive. Understood? So for that, at least you have to take 3 blood pressure readings on different occasions. And you also have to take the person in sitting. Most of the times you take the blood pressure when you're taking vitals of a patient, unless the patient is an inpatient. In the OPD, you take the patient in a sitting position. So unless, of course, you make the patient lie down and all. So that is done for abdominal examination and all that. But vitals and all, mostly 99% of the times in the OPD, you take in a sitting position. So, but then you get one hypertension. I mean, you get a BP of 150 by 100. Then what do? You want to confirm whether this person actually has got hypertension or not, right? Based on one reading, you never label a person hypertensive. So you got to take at least 3 blood pressure readings. Then if the person can come another day just for ruling out the hypertension or for this thing, so you call the person at the same time. Suppose it is morning hours, the person has come around 10 o'clock. So next day also you call around 10. You don't take once in the morning, once in the evening. You take in around the same time. And after a person comes to you, make the person rest for some time, because this person might have come in a hurry, might be in a state of anxiety, might be, in some situation in which the blood pressure might go up. Okay. So now you want to classify this person as being hypertensive or not. So you have to be very, very careful, because obviously once has been diagnosed, then a treatment course has to be started on. So you just don't do it on the basis of one blood pressure reading. You have to take 3 blood pressures at least, and 2 blood pressure readings should be taken at least 3 minutes apart. So this is the gradation. What you have is normal systolic should be less than 120 and diastolic should be less than 80. Then it is normal. Then elevated is 120 to 129, you can see, and diastolic again is less than 80. That means there is a systolic raise of 10 mmg, and diastolic is still less than 80, but you are calling it elevated. Means that is the time when a person, you can also call it as pre-hypertension. You can also label it as pre-hypertension, because then something has to be done about it, or further the person should be observed. And high blood pressure stage 1 is you have 130 to 139, and blood pressure in diastole also you see there is a 10 mmHg rise. Then high blood pressure hypertension 2, this is based on blood pressure reading that you're categorizing. Okay, so on blood pressure reading basis, there are this stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3. So and there is this borderline also and normal. So what do you have? You have normal, you have a pre-hypertensive or elevated or borderline. Then you have stage 1, in which there is this 120. If you're taking that in borderline or pre-hypertensive, 120 to 130, we always keep 1 less, that is 129. Then 139 to 130 to 139. Okay, and diastole is also 10 mmHg raised. High blood pressure stage 2 is 140, systolic stays consistently above 140, and diastole stays 90 or higher, and hypertensive crisis is higher than 180, and then systolic and diastolic is, this is stage 3. This is based on the blood pressure readings. Then, so what do you have? You have normal adult blood pressure. It is arbitrary systolic blood pressure equal to or below 130 mmHg together with diastolic should be less than 80 or 85. Here it is written. Then borderline, what I told you, it is between normal and hypertensive, that is stage 1, or could be any stage, but before you label as hypertensive, that is called borderline. This is very, very important, because when you catch a person in this borderline hypertension, you have to, if you do the modification of the risk factors, this person may not go into hypertension. Then sustained hypertension exists when diastole is, this is diastolic pressure when it is consistently higher than 105, then it is called sustained hypertension. And labile hypertension is sometimes but always the arterial pressure. Sometimes labile means it keeps on changing. Sometimes it is normotensive, sometimes it is hypertensive. Classification extend to the extent of organ damage. See, one was the based on the blood pressure readings. This is second classification is depending on the extent of organ damage. So here stage 1 is you don't find any objective signs of any organ damage. Target organs have not been affected. Stage 2 is at least one of the following signs of organ involvement is present. You have got left ventricular hypertrophy on physical examination, chest X-ray or ECG or echo. What you find? You find the heart has increased in size, left ventricular hypertrophy might be seen, generalized and focal narrowing of the retinal arteries. You find one is stage 1, in which there are no changes in the heart or any of the end organ. Stage 2 is you may find the heart size, left ventricular hypertrophy has taken place, or end, and it can be either that, or with this also there can be focal narrowing of retinal arteries, or in urine you might find proteinuria, or in serum you find plasma creatinine concentration is increased. And stage 3 is both symptoms and signs have appeared as a result of damage. Previously, you found only in the lab or in examination, in the lab investigations or reports. According to that, you found some changes in stage 2. But in stage 3, now the patient has started becoming symptomatic. The signs and symptoms of end organ damages have appeared because of hypertension. So these include in the heart, what you can see, what we had talked about in the last class, they can be angina of effort, myocardial infarction, left ventricular failure. In brain, there can be cerebral brainstem hemorrhage, hypertensive encephalopathy, vascular dementia, and optic fundi. So what you find is retinal hemorrhages and exudates with or without papilledema. These are papilledema. If it is there, edema is there, then that is a malignant condition. Okay, malignant hypertension, not as of cancer. As of this stage in hypertension. Now, classification by etiology. Etiology is what? The cause. So either it can be you can find a cause or you can not find a cause. So 90% of them are hypertension are mostly essential or primary hypertension. Essential, earlier it used to be called but then that essential word has been done away with, because it is sounds little funny, in the sense it seems as if it's very important, or it has to be there, that kind of a thing. So it is called primary hypertension now. And secondary is when you can find a cause. So persistent hypertension is one of the risk factors for stroke, heart attacks, heart failure, and arterial aneurysm, and is a leading cause of chronic renal failure. Persistent hypertension, what did I say? When was it? When diastolic pressure is always high, is more than 105. It is called persistent hypertension. So even moderate elevation of arterial blood pressure leads to a shortened life expectancy. And when severely high pressure, that is grade 3, is there with end organ damage and all. So there, and mean arterial pressure around 50% or more, then even the lifespan comes down to less than 50%. They have got nearly half the lifespan of other people. Pre-hypertension, what did I told you before? If a person's BP is coming between the normotensive and hypertension grade 1, it is called pre-hypertension. It is, like I told you, very, very important. prehypertension is very important for lifestyle modification, modifiable risk factors. If you manage to make a difference there, then the person will not go into hypertension. But if blood pressure is over 130 by 80, okay, 130 by 80, it is high, it is sort of prehypertension. But if there is a comorbidity, like there is diabetes or hypercholesteremia, then definitely that person only lifestyle modifications will not do. That person has to be brought under treatment. So now resistant hypertension is defined as a failure to reduce blood pressure even after taking drugs, even after medication, if the blood pressure is refusing to respond. Now, blood pressure measurement, this is very important. Observer error, instrument error, subject error. These are very, very important part. Why? Because if one of the errors is there, one instrument, if it is faulty, so what happens is you label the person as hypertensive or normotensive. It might not be that way. Okay. Observer error is your error. The way you are taking it, you are doing it, you're not doing it in the correct manner, you have not tied the cuff properly, you have not inflated and or deflated. It is to be slow deflation, not immediate release of pressure, something like that. Then subject error is the patient. If the patient is in a very has rushed, is mentally stressed out, is in an anxiety state, then also you might get a high reading. So risk factors, what did I tell you? Modifiable and non-modifiable. So modifiable ones are, again, they are the body weight, sodium chloride, salt intake, alcohol intake, physical activity, psychosocial factors, socio-economic status, hormonal contraceptives. This is important for women. Then non-modifiable are age, sex, and gender, which you can't do much about. Hereditary, again, ethnicity and race. Non-modifiable are the ones for which you can't do anything about, but modifiable, you can definitely do something about. What do you do for obesity? The risk of hypertension is 5 times higher in obese people. So obviously the patient is asked, or the person or individual is asked, to lose weight. So more than 85% of the cases occur in those with BMI higher than 25. Then sodium sensitivity is a very important factor. Why? Because sodium chloride, that is common salt, some people might be sensitive to sodium chloride, in the sense that whatever they eat, you might be eating, and that person also might be in the same age bracket, might be, same sex and same kind of work. Both are coming to college, or you have the same kind of activity. But body weight also might be. But still, one person develops hypertension, and with salt control, that person reduces, the blood pressure comes down. That is called salt sensitivity. Each individual is different. Some people, they retain salt. And this salt, when it goes into the blood, it will act as a osmotic, it will pull in water inside. So that will cause the blood pressure to go up. Now, sodium is an environmental factor. We always say, so on an average, what do we say? We say control salt. Okay, one of these factors. We say reduce salt in your diet. Don't take extra salt. Don't take high salt food items, something like pickle, papad and all. These will have the chips. They have very high salt intake, high salt quantity. So these people are advised, please avoid those things, and also in cooking, keep salt low. So why is that? Because those same things other people are eating, nothing is happening to them. Because these people might be sensitive to salt. Then sleep apnea is a very, very important reason, which is very often overlooked. In sleep apnea, what happens? A person's uvula goes backwards, and mostly it is seen in very obese people, or people who snore very loudly, or obese people. You find what happens, for a short period they stop their breathing. The breathing stops for a while, and again it restarts. But that short period in which the person has not been breathing, the blood pressure starts going up. So this is a very, very important under recognized cause for hypertension. For sleep apnea, once it is diagnosed, there are these machines which are hooked up, and the person, when is sleeping, can keep it near the bed and put it on, that mask and everything, so that what happens is, when the person goes into sleep apnea, a positive pressure is given. Automatically the machine detects and gives, and thus the person starts breathing again. So this is done. Now genetics again you can't do much about, but only thing is if the parents, both side parents, they are hypertensives and this person knows about it, then this person starts taking precautions earlier, because it starts a decade earlier when the genetics are strong. A decade earlier it starts than in other people. Suppose people, we say middle age, around 50, 60 people are getting hypertensive. But then these people in their 40s and 30s, they might get hypertensive. So once they know that, yes, my parents are both hypertensive, one person has got myocardial infarction, my father had a chest pain, my mother is hypertensive, she's on medication. So definitely then the next generation, if you have to be cautious, you have to take precautions at least a decade earlier, so that it doesn't come on. And as with growing age, what happens is the collagen in the arteries and they stiffness increases, they become less elastic, the elasticity reduces, so thus the blood vessels, they become stiffer, and thus what happens is systole is when the heart is doing contraction and pushing blood into the arteries. When the arteries are elastic, what happens, the walls absorb the pressure, and then the aim is blood should be reaching the end organs and get perfused. Now if the arteries are stiff, then what happens is this pressure, once the push is there, the walls are not elastic, they are not this thing, and then thus the pressure stays in the vessel and hypertension occurs. Okay. Rebound hypertension is what happens is when hypertensives, they are on treatment, and suddenly what happens is it is stopped all of a sudden, the medication are stopped all of a sudden, then the hypertension goes higher than what it was originally. The blood pressure is higher, that is called rebound hypertension. That is why always any medication, when you have to reduce, it has to be in a gradual manner. It should not be abrupt. Depending on the severity of the increase in blood pressure, rebound hypertension, it can result in hepatitis emergency, so it is not to be taken lightly. See, so this is how is it avoided? Gradually reducing the dose. It is called dose tapering. So the body adjusts to the reduction in dose. Pregnancy-induced hypertension is an entity which exists when a lady is pregnant. 10% of the ladies, they develop hypertension. Now it is a very, very important condition. Why? Because it may lead to the death of the mother and death of the baby, because it leads to a condition called preeclampsia and then can become eclampsia. Preeclampsia is, when do we say a pregnant lady has got preeclampsia? When you find her blood pressure is consistently raised and there is proteinuria, that is, in the urine there are proteins, so that is called consistent increase. Okay, consistent increase in blood pressure and this thing, so that is preeclampsia. If that time the lady is given treatment and is taken put under medication and all, so she will not go into eclampsia. Eclampsia is she develops these convulsions. That can result in her death or death of the baby. So it is a very, very important entity. I think in MCH chapter which Valeshwari madam is taking, she has covered this topic, I hope. Now this is rule of halves for blood pressure measurement. So basically, if you go from the center, diagnosed and treated, for every person diagnosed and treated, there are two people. Adequately treated is the centralmost round. Can you see? Adequately treated is the centermost round. Now for one adequately treated people, there are two people who are diagnosed and treated, and there are 4 people who have been diagnosed with hypertension, and there are 8 people who are hypertensive subjects, and this is a community of 16 people. Okay, I am going from inside to outside. So it is a rule of halves, in the sense we say in the whole community, 50% of the people we can say are hypertensive subjects. I mean, if we do a screening of these people, half of them will turn up to be hypertensives. Now, hypertensive subjects, we don't label them hypertension till we have what we have explained to you earlier, that is done. So then half of them are diagnosed with hypertension, then these diagnosed people, they are put on treatment. Only half of them are put under treatment. Now, these half who are put under treatment, compliance of medication is a very, very important factor, because they are never compliant, because it is nothing obvious. One can't see. If one is hypertensive, fine, one can't make out, isn't it? This person will, as such per se, never come for hypertension saying that, oh doctor, I think I have got hypertension. People come with some other problem, and hypertension is an incidental finding. So obviously, for an incidental finding, a patient is not ready to continuously every day take medication again and again. What they do is, maybe after a week or 10 days or a month or maximum 2 months, they will by themselves leave it off. So compliance is a very big issue with all these non-communicable diseases. So adequately treated and consistently taking treatment will be only the smallest round. Understood? So this is like a tip of an iceberg also. You can see it's forming an iceberg now, the whole community, then it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and tip of iceberg. Now, tracking of blood pressure is another issue, which is, these are very important, because rule of horse tracking of blood of individuals. If you do in a school health, we take blood pressure of the students. Those who have found to have higher blood pressure, they should be tracked. Why? Because these people definitely, when they grow older, their blood pressure will keep on increasing. It will never come down. So they continue. So individual, since if they followed since childhood into adult life, those individuals with initially high blood pressure will continue on the same track. That is, they will have high BP in adulthood as well. This phenomenon of persistence of rank order of blood pressure has been described as tracking. It helps in identifying at-risk children and adolescents. Prevention of hypertension, like every prevention, there is this primary prevention and secondary prevention. Primary prevention is, we have these two strategies, population strategy and high-risk strategy. Population strategy is, screening is done, prevention is done, and prevention is done at the level of whole population. That is population strategy. And high risk is those people with all the risk factors we have seen, modifiable, non-modifiable. Those people only are taken, and they are intervention is done, and primary prevention is done on those people. Understood? And secondary prevention. What is secondary prevention? It's early diagnosis and treatment. So general measures are diet, in which alcohol consumption, low salt in food, correcting obesity. These are very, very important. Risk factor modification, cessation of smoking, and reducing hyperlipidemia. This is very important. There's a very important thing called DASH diet. When we talk about diet, there is something called DASH diet, in which dietary modification to reduce hypertension is done. Then exercise and relaxation. This is also very, very important. So in prevention, in DASH diet, what do in food, DASH diet, then exercise, manage weight, cut salt, stop smoking, limit alcohol, manage stress. Type A personality. You know who are type A personality? Who are very, very achievers and very go-getters, and they get very tensed up if others are doing better than them. They want to be always, in the race, they always want to be in the front. So those people are called type A personality. They are not able to relax. They might be, okay, they might say, no, I'm exercising a lot. They might be doing actually treadmill like for 1 hour, and they might be taking care of their salt and, food and all that also they might be doing, because they're very, very hyper. But the thing is, they lose out on sleep, and they are very stressed out. So if those two things are not managed, and you're managing everything else, even in spite of that, they land up having MIs, they land up having stroke. So all of them are important, including stress management, food and all. I find some people leaving one Mohammed 56 roll number. Before that, what is it, 56 roll number? You have got a bad connection? Because I can see people who are leaving and coming back, and also I've got a record. These Excel sheets, they will be kept, and according to that, your attendance will be given. So Don't think that we won't get to know who's come, who's gone, and who's not come. All these Excel sheets are being maintained, and what time to what time you have attended the class. I don't know what you're doing. You're sleeping out there, or reading a book, or seeing your mobile or not. I don't know. But the thing is, we have got only this much so far. Now, weight control, body weight is definitely directly related to blood pressure. So, reduction in weight achieves proportionate lessening of arterial pressure. Control of salt intake, I have already explained it to you. Some people are sensitive to salt, sodium. They have to keep their intake less than 3 to 5 grams per day. In summers, in India, in summers, it gets very hot and a person might lose a lot of salt while sweating. So depends on what the kind of work you do. If you are sweating a lot and all, then at that time it's advisable not to reduce your salt too much. But otherwise, on an average, if you're not really a big sweater or something like that, you don't sweat a lot, then it's better to keep the salt intake to less than 3 to 5 grams per day, especially high risk groups. Physical activity, this definitely has got an indirect effect on blood pressure by reducing, not only it reduces body weight, also it increases the pumping activity of the heart. So physical activity is good for not only hypertension, for heart activity also, for keeping the heart healthy also. Weight reduction and regular aerobic exercises. There is something called anaerobic exercise and aerobic exercise. Aerobic is when you start huffing and puffing and your heart rate goes up. Anaerobic is when actually what they do is weight training and all that, to build up the muscles, in which the heart rate doesn't go up much. Behavioral approaches are basically reducing stress, relaxation therapy should be taken, meditation, mind body relaxation, all those things should be done, reducing stress. Tobacco and alcohol, like it is being repeatedly said, they are very, very harmful for any of the non-communicable diseases you see. Tobacco use, alcohol consumption, both have to be stopped. And the environmental stress, even if there is too much of sound, when especially crackers or some sound, some function is going on nearby and you're really not part of it, it gets very irritating. So some people, with that irritation, the blood pressure goes up. Then also too much of lighting, if you are exposed to too much of lighting, that also causes stress. Over illumination causes stress, so that also can result in hypertension. DASH diet is, I told you about diet earlier. So DASH diet encourages to reduce the sodium in the diet and eat a variety of foods rich in nutrients that help lower blood pressure, such as potassium, calcium, and magnesium. The dietary items should be rich in potassium, calcium, and magnesium. So that is the thing. So it's like a triangle, in which in the lowermost is where you can eat plenty of them, as much as you want those items. Then second is little limitation, third is little more limitation, fourth one is obviously very, very reduced, and fifth one is if you don't have it, better. So that's the in the pyramid what you have. So what you have lower down, you can see for yourself, these fruits and green leafy vegetables, and fruits also should be, normally they say, in your plate, the food items, they should be different colors. They should be red also, green also, yellow also. In your fruits also, it should be like that. It should not be like only one variety you have every day. You can always keep on changing. Then you have grains and nuts and grains, so they should go for the whole grains and the whole dals, whole dals, because they will have, and the nuts also. So they can be had within a amount. And then after that, limited is dairy items and non-veg items you reduce little bit more, and then oils and all you reduce much more, and then sweets you just avoid, which is at the tip. So that is that. Secondary is early diagnosis and treatment. How do you do early diagnosis? Obviously by blood pressure reading, you do screening, early case detection, and you start treatment, effective treatment. Like I told you earlier also, patient compliance is a very important factor, because most of the times people think that, okay, I was diagnosed hypertension, but now I'm okay, I don't feel anything, isn't it? Because it is an incidental finding most of the times. So what do they do? Why continue with taking tablets every day? I have to sit and swallow. Or let it be, no, I'm okay like that only, and they leave it. So patient compliance is a very, very important. Second issue is buying the medicines, because these medicines are you have to buy. They are not available. Of course, now these days primary health centers also they're stocking up, and they are giving monthly basis. They are giving off these medicines, but I don't know how many primary health centers are actually giving it on a regular basis. But buying the drugs, if they are asked month after month, year after year, you have to buy these medicines and take, they will say, obviously, I'm okay. I mean, why should I spend money on this every time? Especially a person who's got limited amount of income and all, they will think like that. Now the effects, what do you have? Complications. So complications are, you start from the top, you have stroke in brain, then you have in the eyes, you have got vision loss, and in the heart, you have got heart attack, heart failure. Then low down, you get kidney disease, kidney failure, and then sexual dysfunctions. These are the complications of hypertension. Okay, you start from the top and go down to the bottom. Each organ you can mention. So complications of hypertension, there is this target organ damage. So again, we can go by brain, just said transient ischemic attacks can be there, stroke can be there. In heart, you have left ventricular hypertrophy, you have cardiac heart disease, you have got heart failure, then renal failure, then peripheral vascular disease can be there, retinopathy can be there. So these are the complications. So hypertension, what we have covered is the classification of hypertension. Classification of hypertension is based on the measurement, the cause, if you know. Okay, so cause, if you know, you know primary, secondary, based on the measurement, how much it is. And third is the kind of end organ damage. These are the three classifications for hypertension. Then you have got risk factor, you have got modifiable or non-modifiable risk factors. Then you have what? The how the modified factors can be modified, the risk factors can be modified, and then the complications which can be there. Prevention, again, risk factor modification, primary prevention, which has got population strategy and high risk strategy. Then you've got secondary prevention. Tertiary prevention is obviously when they land up with complications, which will be as such hypertensive crisis, that is in hypertension per se, or cerebrovascular disease, which is called stroke. So stroke is the brain getting affected. So stroke is the third most common cause of death and second most common cause of neurological disability after Alzheimer's disease in older age group people. This incidence has reduced in recent decades, but still it appears to have leveled off, but still leading cause for institutionalization and loss of independence. Stroke still results in a person being put in an institution for care or hospital for some time, and loss of independence. It means they are not able to carry out the work. That is there. Stroke is cerebrovascular accident. Stroke is also called cerebrovascular accident. Basic underlying pathology is what? It is one acute neurological deficit which has resulted from decreased blood supply. Third leading cause of death, 2 per 1,000 per year. So it depends on the severity, upon the location, and upon the type. Depends. So there is this global or focal, and there is a TIA or evolving. TIA, transient ischemia, which can be evolving or can be completed. There can be low hypoxia, that is low oxygen, low blood supply. Now, we have to talk a little bit about the brain, some features of the brain blood supply, because it is a little different from the other organs. Brain has got the high requirement of oxygen. Brain, 2% of the body weight, but 15% of the cardiac output reaches the brain, though it is only 2% of the body weight. And 20% of the total body oxygen is required by the brain. And secondly, second point is continuous oxygen requirement is required. Continuous oxygen should be going there. In even a few minutes of ischemia results in irreversible injury. Even if a supply is stopped for a short while, it results in irreversible. That is, recovery is not there. And neurons are predominantly aerobic. That is, they need continuous supply of oxygen. And sensitive areas in the brain, which are in adults, hippocampus, third, fifth, and sixth layer of cortex, Purkinje cells, and border zones, watershed areas. This is very important. The watershed areas, in which watershed area is basically the one artery from this side, one artery from this side is supplying, but that area is falling in between two supply areas. So that is the watershed area. Brainstem nuclei in infants is very, very sensitive. Now, what are the types of stroke we have? We have got clinically, when we see, what we have is clinical classification is we have got TIA, who recover in less than 24 hours. Within a day, they recover, TIA. Evolving stroke, completed stroke, and recurrent multiple stroke. This is based on the clinical diagnosis. Now, pathological, that is what is happening in the brain. What you have is focal, oblique, global. These are the two types you have. You have ischemic, that is white or pale, in which basically the supply has just been stopped, or some point it has been stopped. So that is called ischemic. Or hemorrhagic, bleeding has taken place, or they can be lacunar infarcts. So two types of stroke, basically you can see in the picture, there is ischemic stroke and hemorrhagic stroke. Ischemic stroke, what has happened is at one point, the blood circular, that is artery, has got a thing stuck in it, okay, which is not allowing the blood to pass further distally. So that could be a thrombus, that could be atherosclerosis, which has suddenly closed. Most of the times it is a thrombus, okay, which has come and got stuck there because already the artery was getting narrower that place because of deposition of cholesterol, okay. And hemorrhagic is there, bleeding has taken place. All right, hemorrhagic, as the name suggests, bleeding has taken place in the distal area. So common types, infarction is the most common type, incidence is 80%, mortality is 40%. Infarction is the most common type. 20% is the hemorrhagic type, 80% is the infarction type. So 50% of them are thromboembolic atherosclerosis. Like I told you, the same thing. When thrombus has come, atherosclerosis is already there, the vessel is already atherosclerosed, and it has got stuck there, it is not able to pass further. So in large vessels, 30%, small vessels, 20%. Lacunar stroke, small vessels when it goes and gets stuck. Then 30% are embolic, where one embolus started forming there. Thrombotic is embolus, one has broken off from somewhere else and come and got stuck there. One is embolic, where embolus got stuck there and it is increasing there rapidly. Hemorrhagic incidence is 20%, but mortality is 80%. Hemorrhagic, though it is 20% of the total strokes are hemorrhagic, but 80% of them, they die off. Okay, so it is a very, very serious type of stroke, hemorrhagic. So it can be intracerebral or subarachnoid. There are these types, aneurysm because of hypertension, or congenital, some this thing can be there. So etiology is what is the cause, complications of several disorders like atherosclerosis, hypertension, heart disease. All these things, they can be, like I told you, it's a web of causation. It is not one particular, you can say only because of hypertension this person got a stroke. It could be the person has atherosclerosis also, has got hypercholesteremia also, is a hypertensive also, has got heart disease, and suddenly the atrial fibrillation has taken place because of the heart disease. Then others can be there like because of trauma. Plenty of times it happens is, in fracture femur, there can be, fat embolism, fat emboli, can fat goes into the blood and forms an emboli, and thus it will go all over the circulation and go and get stuck in the brain. Then because of tumor or infections or Caissen's disease bends, that is, Caissen's disease, it is a deep divers. When deep sea divers, when they go down and down, the pressure keeps on increasing. But so when they come up very fast, they come up very fast, the nitrogen dissolved in the air, in the blood which is there, which it forms bubbles because of decrease in pressure very fast, and it will come, and those bubbles, they will go and get stuck at various end arteries, and this will result in peripheral arterial blockages, and thus those excruciating pains, bends and pains, it is called bends. Excruciating pain will be there, and if this bubbling happens in the brain, then what happens? You have got ischemia in the brain or stroke. So the risk factors are again the same way, non-modifiable and modifiable. Non-modifiable are age, male, sex. Males are more predominantly more affected, race, hereditary, and modifiable are hypertension, diabetes, smoking, hyperlipidemia, excess alcohol intake, heart disease, oral contraceptives, hypercoagulability. Risk factors. So tobacco use, diet, obesity, alcohol consumption, physical activity, stress, all these things. You find a lot of them are common with hypertension. You can see for yourself. So clinical categories, we have global ischemia, in which the whole sort of brain is getting affected. That is hypoxemic encephalopathy, hypotension, hypoxemia, anemia. These can result in global ischemia. sudden drop on blood pressure. That is called hypotension suddenly. So sudden drop results in the brain getting affected. So that is why when you see people having a myocardial infarction and so obviously the circulation will be, the heart is not able going to pump very effectively and the person loses consciousness and falls. So what do? We raise the legend. So what happens is the circulation, whatever little is there, we raise the leg so that it reaches the brain, because we want to keep the brain alive. All right. So this is what. Then focal is because of obstruction to a blood supply, focal area of a brain. So this mostly results from thrombosis, embolism, or hemorrhage. Local infarction, cell death takes within 6 minutes. If 6 minutes is within 6 minutes circulation is not restarted or oxygen does not reach that part, cell death takes place. Umbra surrounded by penumbra of ischemic tissue, that is there. So what did you see? Umbra and penumbra. The hemorrhagic, you can see a picture here. There are these spots where bleeding has taken place. Infarct stages, what do you have immediately? 6 hours. This is very important. Within 6 hours, no change, both in gross and micro. Within that time, if you are able to manage and get it restarted, at least not major neurological defects will stay. But acute stage 2 days where there is edema, loss of gray and white matter border, and inflammation takes place, red neurons, neutrophils, all these things, they come. Intermediate stage is 2 weeks where demarcations of tribal tissue and cysts and all, they start forming. These are all pathological changes which are taking place, and macrophages, they appear, and liquefactive necrosis take place. Later, after 4 weeks, pathologically what you see in the brain is fluid-filled cysts which are there, and tissue macrophages are actively removing the tissues, and gliosis, that is proliferation of glia takes place, and architectural losses. The cerebral edema, you can see here the sulci and gyri, the sulci are demarcation is lost. Now, depending on the effect where it is there, left that is dominant, left dominant in the right handed people, left side is dominant. So left dominant hemisphere stroke, common pattern, what you see is aphasia, that is difficulty in speech. Aphasia, right hemiparesis, right side the body has got weakness, then right side sensory loss is there, right side visual field defect will be there, poor right conjugate gaze will be there, dysarthria will be there. That is, one is aphasia, inability to speak, one is dysarthria is inability to form words, then difficulty in reading, writing, or calculating. Then the right side non-dominant, that is for the right-sided people, right side is the non-dominant side. What you have is left side will be affected, left side visual field defect will be there, left side stimuli will be gone, left side hemiparesis will be there, left side sensory loss will be there, visual defect will be there, poor conjugate gaze will be there, dysarthria, spatial disorientation will be there. So brain stem stroke, which is the common pattern, what you have, pure motor weakness of the face and limbs on one side of the body without abnormalities of the higher brain function, sensation, or vision. Pure sensory will be decreased sensation of face and limbs on one side of the body without abnormality of the higher brain function, motor function, or vision. So understood? There, this common pattern is pure motor or pure sensory. Pure motor is weakness of one side without abnormalities of the higher brain sensation or vision or anything. Nothing else has changed. Only the motor activity of the side has been affected. Sensory is, motor is not much affected, but the vision, the sensations and all, they are affected. So this is very, very important. FAST, F-A-S-T. Face, does the face look uneven? What happens? How do you make out whether this person has got stroke? You ask the person to smile. When the person is trying to smile, one side will droop. It will not go up like the other side. Then you ask the person to raise both the arms. Does one arm drift up? The person is not able to lift and keep it up the other side. Then speech is some common words which a person, you have heard this person speaking, those common words you ask them to, like spoon, like brush, like hair, or some short words, don't go for long ones. Use short words and ask them to speak those words. So if they are coming little jumbled, then definitely it's an emergency. A stroke has taken place and you have to immediately, time is every second counts, immediately that person has to be taken to a healthcare. So this is FAST. FAST is for recognition. Investigations, obviously, what do? You get a CT scan of the brain, then ECG, you would get it done, X-ray chest, get it done, complete blood, then coagulation time, prothrombin time, these are very, very important. Serum electrolytes, then blood glucose, renal and hepatic chemical analysis. All these things are very, very important. Then you have a National Institute of Health Care, NIH's score, which is taken at a regular interval to see the prognosis, the clinical and the prognosis, which is to be taken immediately. The score is taken to see how is this. Now, what are the risk factors for stroke? Again, they are like what for heart, for hypertension, again, same, more or less the same. Lack of exercise, sleep apnea, heavy alcohol use, smoking, drug users, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, obesity. All these factors are there for risk factors as stroke, and these also it is like repetitive. These, because they're the factors, these same factors will come up again and again and again. And again, I keep on underlining the fact that it's a web of causation. You cannot say only one thing. Lack of exercise will result in a stroke, or sleep apnea will result in. It's all these factors, more or less, they will result. They will cause either the infarct kinds or hemorrhagic. Infarction is 80%, hemorrhagic is 20%. Infarction, the fatality is lesser and the prognosis is much better. The hemorrhagic is, the prognosis is bad, and 80% of the times fatality is there. Now, 6-point stroke prevention plan is there. So all these 6 points, again, it is all those factors we saw as the modifiable ones which have to be kept. So keep the blood pressure under control. This is very, very important. First point, keep the blood pressure under control. Then exercise moderately, at least for 150 minutes a week. Ideally 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. So you do that. And leisurely activities and household chores, which you keep on, household activities which you do, they also, you should be active. Just don't sit like a lump on a place and keep on having food and as if you're studying or doing a lot of work. Nothing like that. You have to physically move around. Eat a nutritious plant-based diet. Like I told you, your plate should have at least 3 to 4 colored different objects on your plate. So that is a nutritious plan. Keep your cholesterol within norms. And in case cholesterol is high, see, normally it is like if a person has got normal blood pressure, only cholesterol is high, then the physician will think with dietary control and all of that. But if hypertension is there, cholesterol is on the borderline also, medication is started, because there are 2 risk factors. Whenever 2 risk factors are there, one can't take a risk. And if it's a third one also, oh my God, then all of them have to be treated. Then don't consume more than 2 standard alcoholic drinks per day. So one drink is like 30 ml is one small. So they say don't take more than 2 smalls, that is 60 ml. More than 60 ml should not be taken alcoholic. But even then, that is not a good thing, because nobody stops at 2 small or something like that. It tends to go up, and one body develops develops habituation to it, and they will need more and more. Then don't smoke or quit if you have to do. Please don't smoke. And in case you are a smoker, gradually reduce the smoking or nicotine content in your smoking. Now, if I have the time, I would like, since that person has not come yet, the next person, I would like you to see this YouTube. Where is it gone? This will not open here. Maybe you people can open and see for yourself.
This young man just texted me right now. He took action with my program, which most people don't. He just made his first $1,000.
Hello, in this health sketch we want to talk to you about stroke. It's a bit of an odd name, stroke. It certainly has nothing to do with tennis strokes, swimming strokes, or brush strokes. The word stroke
Are you
comes from
able
the
to
idea
hear?
of receiving a strike or blow, as that is how quickly strokes
Yes,
pace.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
By
please,
this
please see this.
Did you know that every year more than 15 million people worldwide have a stroke? Of these, 5 million die and another 5 million are left disabled. Whilst most strokes occur in people over the age of 65, they can occur in much younger people too. But what exactly is a stroke? The brain, like all parts of the body, needs oxygen, which it gets from the blood. A stroke happens when blood flow to the brain is cut off. When brain cells are starved of oxygen, they become damaged, and the symptoms that follow are called a stroke. As the brain controls the whole body, the symptoms of a stroke can be wide-ranging, depending on which parts of the brain are affected. If the stroke occurs here, it would cause a drooping face. Here, weakness in the arms or legs. Or here, difficulty speaking. Other symptoms can happen too, like changes to vision, loss of balance, confusion, and memory loss. The effects might be barely noticeable, but are more often severe and disabling. Sometimes these changes can be reversed if treatment is started early. That's why it is so important to act quickly if you suspect a stroke. Remember, you need to get help fast. F is for face. Is their face drooping on one side? Can they smile? A is for arms. Is there weakness in the arms? Can they lift them both up? S is for speech. Is their speech slurred? T is for time. If you spot any one of these signs, then it's time to call an ambulance. Once the ambulance arrives at the hospital, a doctor will assess you and arrange an urgent scan of the head, which shows where the brain is damaged and what type of stroke has happened. Strokes are put into two groups depending on the problem in the blood vessels supplying the brain. There can either be a blockage, called an ischemic stroke, or a bleed, called a hemorrhagic stroke. The majority of strokes are blockages. It's important to identify early on which sort of stroke has happened, as they each have very different treatments. Blockage strokes are commonly caused by the buildup of fatty material in blood vessels. This fatty buildup may lead to a clot, which blocks the blood supply, just like in a heart attack. This is why a stroke can be thought of as a brain attack. A clot may occur within the brain, or it can travel from another part of the body, commonly the blood vessels in the neck. Clots can also travel from the heart, which may happen when you have an irregular heartbeat called atrial fibrillation, or AF. If a blockage stroke is detected within the first few hours, a clot-busting medication is sometimes given to dissolve the clot. This is called thrombolysis. If thrombolysis can't be used, other medications such as aspirin will be given as treatment instead. Bleeding strokes happen when a blood vessel bursts suddenly, causing blood to leak in or around the brain. In these strokes, blood on the brain can lead to swelling, a serious problem which may require surgery in some cases. Sometimes, stroke symptoms completely disappear in less than 24 hours. This is called a mini-stroke, or TIA. Often, symptoms only last a few minutes, but just like with a full-blown stroke, you must go to hospital immediately if you suspect a TIA. This is because a TIA is a warning sign that you're at high risk of having a full stroke. Whether you have a TIA or a full stroke, daily medications are started and continued lifelong to help prevent further episodes. The effects of a stroke can be disabling, but given time, the brain can slowly adapt to recover some previously lost abilities. This is why stroke rehabilitation is so important. Rehab can be challenging, but many specialists are on hand to help alongside doctors and nurses. If your stroke causes difficulty swallowing, dietitians can recommend special diets or feeding tubes. If you have problems with communication, speech and language therapists can help. If it has become difficult to walk or perform daily tasks, physiotherapists and occupational therapists can offer exercises and home adaptations. Also, after a stroke, people often feel low or frustrated that they can't do the things they used to, and don't like being dependent on others. Counselors can help talk through these feelings, and many patient groups are available for further support. We've talked a lot about strokes, but what can we do to prevent them from happening? Even if you've already had a stroke in the past, there are many small steps we can all take to reduce our future risk of having a stroke, such as lowering high blood pressure, the number one cause of stroke, stopping smoking, lowering cholesterol, being more active, eating healthily, lowering alcohol intake to within recommended limits. If you have diabetes, keeping good control of blood sugar levels. In this health sketch, we've talked about what a stroke is, how to spot the key symptoms, and the need to act fast. We've also talked about treatments, rehab, and the steps we can take to prevent strokes. We hope this health sketch about stroke has been helpful for you and those around you. Health sketch, health for all to see.
Okay then. So the class for stroke is over, hypertension is over. So next class I will take next Thursday.
This is Sarah
Okay.
Register's Oriental.
Oh, this one has
I'm going to be
to
going over stroke. And this video is part of an in-place review series over the neuron system. And as always, after you watch this YouTube video, you
So
can
now
access
I'm
the
going to
free
stop.
quiz that will test you on this condition.